Well, hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. Quite an episode ahead, quite a last
Did
hour or so for us,
did
Ross.
something happen, Elliot?
I, premium subscribers knew something was happening, I'll tell you that.
That's right.
About an hour before things broke, we shared with our premium subscribers Mark Gronowski was expected to commit to Iowa, and of course that news leaked elsewhere. But Gronowski gonna be a Hawk. He committed. He announced himself, and talk about big news for Iowa's quarterback room. We're gonna talk about all of it here today on this episode of Hawkcast. Myself, Elliot Clough, lead analyst for the site, joined by managing editor Ross Binder. Make sure if you're new, subscribe. We got pods at least once a week covering all things Hawkeyes, football, transfer portal, and of course, we got premium content there at iowa.rivals.com as well. So, start here. First things first, Ross. We knew this one was coming. There have been rumblings for what, like a week or two now, something like that. Feels like
Yep.
it's been a month, but not
Yeah.
quite. Um, I guess initial thoughts. Like I put out a three thoughts article, but I don't know if any of those crossed your mind. But yeah, where are you at? What's the first other than holy shit? Like what's your initial thoughts here?
I just think it's a really big get for Iowa on multiple levels. I mean, it's a get just because he was a big time target in the transfer market. He's a guy, probably the best quarterback available in the portal. So getting a guy like that is just huge in and of itself. And then it's at a huge position of need. I mean, obviously, anyone who's watched Iowa football the last few years knows, the quarterback play has been lacking. It was better this year with Tim Lester as the OC and quarterback coach, and Brendan Sullivan taking over towards the end of the season. We saw improvement, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, this team was lowest ranked in passing yards in the FBS, other than the service academies, and they don't really want to throw the ball. They throw the ball as like a last resort. So there's a lot of work that was needed there, and they just needed better talent, and we've seen that in the portal this last month. Iowa goes and gets a guy, Hank Brown, out of Auburn, who was a quality recruit. He's played games for Auburn, so he's got experience. So they added him, improved the depth of the quarterback room here at Iowa. And then now, they've added Gronowski, who was, you mentioned it in the article, two-time or FCS champion at South Dakota State. Was a great player for some really great Jackrabbit teams. Very capable, really good player. So that's a guy that can come in and compete right away, immediately, with Brendan Sullivan to play for Iowa next year. So, I think they've improved the depth of the quarterback room, and now they've improved, just the immediate impact guy who's going to play on Saturdays next fall, which, prior to this, we were looking at, okay, how much better can Brendan Sullivan get with one more offseason with Tim Lester? He did some good things. We saw in the bowl game, nice first half, not a really good second half, just a lot of inconsistency. We'll talk about this more, and I want to hear what you think. But Gronowski's not going to be handed the job for sure. He's going to have to earn it in spring practice and the training camp before the season. But do you think he's the favorite now to start at quarterback next year? Right? I mean, even though Sullivan has more experience at Iowa, like Gronowski's credentials and what he did at South Dakota State, like again, he's not going to walk in and start, but this guy is got to be the favorite to start week one next year.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he'll be the favorite in the
That's
spring, and I think people.
that's what we call giving you a softball,
Yeah,
Elliot.
right. Yeah. That's that podcast experience coming in clutch right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think people going into the spring game are going to expect him to be the starter, getting the one reps. Would not surprise me at all if he comes out and tells us, or Sully comes out and tells us, yeah, we've been splitting the one reps, us too. Because we tend to hear things like that. We were hearing Stratton was splitting the one reps when we all knew it was going to be Sully in the bowl game. And that would not surprise me in the slightest. I think Sully is a better athlete. That's also large or partly because Gronowski tore his ACL as a freshman at SDSU. And you mentioned the two-time national champ. They were in the national championship when he was a true freshman. They lost to Sam Houston because he tore his ACL in the national championship game. He's out the following year, comes back, wins two straight, and then this year they made it to the semifinals and bowed out against North Dakota State, who's the eventual champion.
He
So
won it 2 nights ago. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Beat Montana State, which is another loaded FCS program. Both of those programs are going to have kids that transfer up and go Power Four, guaranteed. There's
Yep.
a tackle from Montana State that already hit the portal and has 2 years of eligibility left, and it's like, oh, he's going somewhere. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Iowa showed some interest there too. But Gronowski, a proven winner. And I think we may have mentioned this before is what does KF talk about? It's not points per game, it's not yards per game, it's wins per game. And Gronowski's 49-6 in his 55 starts at South
A
Dakota State.
lot. That's a lot of
Uh,
wins.
and like there's no oops loss in there. They never dropped one to UNI. They never dropped one to Southern Illinois. It's North Dakota State. It's Sam Houston. And Sam Houston's now FBS. If that tells you anything. North Dakota State probably should have been FBS a while ago, considering they've won 10 out of the last 15 national titles. And those other two
Yeah.
went to South Dakota State. I
Yep.
mean, this is a program that has just continued to win and win and win and win. And a big part of that has been Mark Gronowski for the fact that, I mean, well, one, he's their quarterback. Like he's been under center and he's been under center every available year that he's been healthy. And let's look at his stats from the last few seasons, Ross. This is over 4 seasons with South Dakota State. This is not counting the season he was out, obviously, because he didn't play. Completed 755 of 1,188 passes. I believe that's about 64%, if not more, right? That's that's really high. Um, for 10,309 yards, 93 touchdowns, and just 20 interceptions. That's like a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. On the ground, he had 385 carries for 1,767 yards and 37 scores.
Yeah, the numbers that really jump out to me there are that completion percentage, which is, really solid, well over 60%, and that touchdown to interception, over 4-to-1, almost 5-to-1. That is some really good decision making, putting the ball, getting his receivers to where they could score and not making, poor or risky decisions with the ball. And that's something that will endear him to Kirk Ferentz very quickly because Kirk does not like quarterbacks who are dangerous with the ball unless they're Deacon Hill, I guess, and he has no other choice. But um,
Yeah.
sorry, Deacon. Uh,
Deacon catching
but
strays 2 years
yeah,
later.
that's mean. That's
A
mean. But
year.
no, we don't want to talk about Deke. Gronowski, he doesn't make those throws. He is just a really good decision maker, and we've seen that from him time and again over the last 5 seasons. So that is something that is going to be a really good fit in Iowa's offense.
The other thing that I think we may have alluded to before is just that this makes sense for a lot of reasons. Gronowski was recruited by Iowa out of high school. Did not get an offer from Iowa. His only D1 offers were South Dakota State, Valpo, and Butler. And I believe Butler is also part of the Pioneer League. Neither of those programs give scholarships. So that's telling of his
Yeah.
development and what they saw in him at South Dakota State. He also received interest from Ball State and Miami of Ohio. But it wasn't these types of programs that were getting involved. I got some a nugget from somebody thanks to connections from Northern Iowa and covering UNI like I did a few years ago, which saw Gronowski play I think 2 or 3 times and just carved UNI. Like this is before they were 2-8 and they had legitimate defenses under Mark Farley. He carved them up, just a class ahead of everybody else, and he was from the jump. Now, what I was getting at is I'd heard that there was possibly a bidding war towards the end here between Iowa and another program. There's a lot of money involved here. But regarding Gronowski and why it all makes sense to me is these Dakota programs are a lot like Iowa. They see diamonds in the rough. They get them up there in the Dakotas where a lot of recruiting staffs don't go Because Ross, I don't know if you've been through the Dakotas. I drove up there for a track meet. There ain't nothing up there. Just, I mean, like we at least have corn in Iowa.
Yeah.
They have nothing. And
It's
so,
empty.
what?
It's empty.
It is, yeah, whole lot of nothing. So it makes a lot of sense for the reason that both are developmental programs. And Gronowski, I've never interacted with him, but he strikes me as one of these guys that knows he has to earn it. Doesn't strike me as a guy that would have gone to a USC, gone to a Miami, Florida, gone to, I don't know, Oregon, maybe Oregon is a little different over there, but gone to a program like that. He strikes me as a Midwest, lunch pail, hardworking kid that knows the job isn't going to be handed to him, unlike two other quarterbacks I'm thinking of at this moment in time, and knows that he's going to have to go in and earn it, go in and earn the respect of the guys. He's not gonna, you know, he and Sully, I will presume, will be competitive, but that'll be a good relationship. And we haven't heard anything to the contrary regarding him and like Cade or anything. But um, this is the type of quarterback that you see come in, and I think should he win the job, which we expect him to, Sullivan, it'll just be a tip your cap like you earned it, man. Like he might be frustrated, he might want more snaps, and we may very well see a little bit of what we saw last year, where Sully comes in specific packages just because he's that type of athlete, right? And Gronowski has legs to him. I mentioned all those stats: 1,700 rushing yards, 37 touchdowns on the ground. He's a big dude too, 6'3", 230, but he can run. Um,
I
and
think
having
quarterback sneak might be back on the menu
exactly.
if we can block it well, at least, or Iowa can block it well.
Having Sullivan as an insurance policy is awesome. And then Hank Brown, who is a better quarterback than, say, Iowa starter 2 seasons ago.
More
And
strays.
more strays. Um, and this is just a move. And honestly, like I said it on Twitter, I kind of expanded on it for our premium subscribers, and I'll do that here now, is that I think Gronowski's a better fit than Pribula would have been. Gronowski's got more arm talent. Yeah, it's 1 year as opposed to two, but he's more arm talent. He's more of an NFL prospect. He's taller. He's got experience starting over multiple years against elite competition in the FCS, like the Montanas, like North Dakota State. This is a guy that has won continually, has proven that he can do it. Of course, you'd love to have 2 years instead of a 1 year mercenary, but for all of those reasons, Gronowski's a better fit to me.
He's a much better passer too than Pribula, who just didn't have that many reps as actually throwing the ball. Really great, with his legs, great running the ball, great change of pace. But, as a passer, there were still some question marks there. I don't think you have any question marks about Gronowski as a passer. The only question really is, just adjusting to, the speed and physicality of, Big Ten defenses. But, he has played FBS teams at South Dakota State. He's played Iowa's defense, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago in the infamous.
73 game
And,
didn't play particularly well, but
right,
nobody did against that defense, right?
that defense was nails. So yeah, I don't think that's a demerit on Gronowski at all. So yeah, I agree. I think Pribula was a really exciting prospect. Would have been great to get, but I think you're right. I think for what Iowa needs and for what Iowa wants to do, Gronowski does feel like a much better fit. And he's also, you mentioned the 1 year, kind of mercenary thing versus 2 years, and you'd love to have a guy that could, you could mold for a couple years and get a couple years production out of. But at the same time, having a 1 year guy means you're not, those guys that you recruited and brought in, they're not blocked essentially. Jimmy Sullivan, a guy like that, he's he can redshirt while Gronowski's here next year, and he's going to have the same amount of eligibility and playing time opportunities. So, if you bring in a more high profile guy with more years to play, maybe that has a trickle down effect on the younger quarterbacks. That shouldn't be an issue here. And he can just, hopefully be great next year and be a mentor for those guys, as they're developing in the program. So, yeah, I agree with that. Just a really good fit, really exciting fit. Um, and I wanted to go back to a minute ago, you mentioned Sullivan and his athleticism. Yeah, I definitely think there can be a role for Sullivan in this offense. Expanding on that, that red zone role we saw him in at the start of this season, where he can come in and obviously he can run some RPOs. He can run the ball. He can do some different things. There's definitely more for him to do. His athleticism is clear. I think that was super apparent in that crazy scramble he had in the Music City Bowl against Missouri. I mean, he covered so much of the field on that run. It was ridiculous. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with a guy like that. So yeah, there's a lot to be excited about there, and a lot that Gronowski is going to offer.
Yeah. Um, One thing that I put on Twitter as well, if you folks want to check it out, I'll put it in the description too, if you want to see it with your own eyes. But um, talking about this coming year and all the changes that have happened with the Iowa offense, and well, you know what? Let me address something that you said, Ross. Is you mentioned 2 years not blocking Sullivan. It's not blocking Hank Brown either. Like
Nope.
Hank Brown is fully expecting to come in and compete for the job, which you love to hear, right? As a guy who started some games, but you love to hear that more now that you've got Gronowski on the roster, right? He and
Yeah.
Sullivan on the roster. And for all we know, Hank Brown could cook for a year, like, sit in the oven, cook a little bit, grow, get more familiar with the offense, have 2 springs under his belt, and be Iowa starter next season and make Auburn look stupid, or I guess the following season. So that's something I wanted to hit on. But also, we got to give a shout out to Tim Lester here, right? This
100%.
this does not happen without Tim Lester as Iowa's offensive coordinator for a lot of reasons. And I'll quote a source here and what I put on Twitter and shared with our premium subscribers. Well, I had this source tell me that they had a really solid feeling about the visit for Gronowski. Why? And I quote, anytime a quarterback spends extended time with Tim Lester, they leave excited about Iowa. That's Tim Lester in a nutshell. It's hard not to be. I mean, even in press conferences, Ross, like we're
Yeah.
talking with there's a palpable energy
His
and
his enthusiasm is infectious. I mean, and we're just, dummies writing about the game. We don't get to go out there and actually play it. So,
exactly. And having been an athlete, anybody that's been an athlete, you like to play, especially in, my generation, maybe a little bit younger. You don't like we don't do well with that type of feedback in terms of the folks that'll rip you a new one. And Lester is just like, here, I saw this, do that, whatever. And I saw what you did right here. Next time, do this. It's just that type of energy that is infectious and that builds you up, doesn't tear you down. It's just he's a guy that you leave excited after talk. I mean, what did I just say? Like you leave
yeah.
excited about Iowa, right? Uh,
Yep.
and to have that type of energy on the staff with your arguably your most important player, your quarterback, is really important. And
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say we've heard that, that same message from every single quarterback on the roster and every single quarterback recruit that's interacted with Lester. That is a consistent message that, everybody that speaks to him really likes him, really gets excited, really wants to play. So, that is just such a huge thing. And it's such a 180-degree change from what Iowa had, at that position, the quarterback coach and OC with Brian Ferentz. Like just night and day difference. Like Gronowski is not coming to Iowa City if the previous previous guy was still here. I'm pretty confident in saying that.
And none of us would blame him. Okay.
Right.
And other person we've got to shout out here is Brad Heinrichs for getting this done, head of Swarm, and all the people at Swarm, because it doesn't happen. That's just the state of college football, right? It doesn't happen without
Absolutely.
those guys. And Brad clearly made a push towards the end there, obviously tweeting stuff out. Didn't happen with Pribula, gets it done with Gronowski. And like we've said, this is a better fit in our opinion. Of course, a lot of things to happen yet. Got to go through a spring. Got to get on campus, right? Got to get moved in. But this is this is a reason that Iowa fans can be excited for this coming season, right? Um, and this is a reason, continuing to talk about the portal. This is more of a reason for folks, the kids in the portal that are receivers to say, I got a guy who's done it, passed for 10,000 yards in 4 seasons. Why wouldn't
Yeah,
I
that
be a part of that?
yeah, that's what I'm really interested to see next is kind of what dominoes fall now that, Iowa's got Gronowski as a quarterback. They've had a little trouble, I think we can agree, getting buy-in from receivers in the portal this period. They've had guys on campus for visits and gone after guys, and for a variety of reasons, I think receivers have been a little bit cool to what Iowa's been offering. But I think they have a better, much more to offer now with Gronowski as quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see if that can pay off in the form of more receivers adding them through the portal. That would because that's what Iowa needs dudes at receiver. They needed dudes at quarterback. I think they've done that. Still need some more dudes at receiver.
Yes, they absolutely do. And they've got Jacob Gill. Those types of things probably were part of the conversation with Gronowski. It's like, okay, who am I throwing the ball to, right? Not only are you going to dive into the portal, but you've got your safety valve in Jacob Gill, right? He proved to be that this season. Obviously, the miss in the bowl game, or like the miscatch, the drop in the bowl game, happens, right? That was the only drop we saw from him this year, I think.
One of the few. I don't remember a lot for sure.
Exactly. You've got Addison Ostrenga. The two running backs have shown some things that are really encouraging. Zach Ortworth has two. Reese Vanderzee just going into year two. KJ Parker, phenomenal ball skills, right? But adding a guy that, we've talked about, and Sam Phillips from Chattanooga, that'd be big. It'd be precisely what Iowa wants out of the portal. So they're not done. They're not done, folks. They're going to keep going. And of course, you can follow along with us at
Yeah,
iowa.rivals.com for
just
that premium
well,
subscription.
one more thing, Elliot, about the quarterbacks and the portal. Like, just think about where we were with Iowa 12 months ago. And the quarterback situation. You had Cade coming off, torn up knee, and I think Deacon was still around then, but you had no Sullivan, no Hank Brown, obviously no Gronowski. Jimmy Sullivan was, just a recruit.
James
And there was
Rezar was still in high school and still going to be a Hawkeye
right,
and still going
Rezar
to
was
play quarterback at that point.
right, right, and Marco Linez was there. So
Yep.
like it's just a complete turnover almost from then to now, and it's impossible, I would say, not to be a lot more excited about the potential for the quarterback room, both I would say immediately next year, and then also for the future beyond that. Like there's just much better options at that position now than what we were seeing at Iowa, I guess, 12 months ago.
Lester has gotten his guys in the room expeditiously,
Yeah.
right? Like
Well,
none of these guys were on the roster, like you just said. None of them, zero. Now you've got six of your own guys.
well, there's the other thing. 12 months ago, we didn't quite have Tim Lester yet. I think Iowa was still looking for an OC. That was official in, I think, later in January or something. It
Yeah,
was,
I think so. Yeah.
it was not right after the bowl game for sure. So yeah, just massive, massive transformation at that position, which much needed for Iowa. So that's a really good sign.
So just to wrap this part of the conversation up, last year it was Deacon Hill and Marco Linez available at quarterback. Was Tommy Paholski still around, or had he entered? I think he entered the portal at that point. Either that or after the spring. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember if he entered before spring or after spring. So that was a little
Ended up at
fuzzy.
Colorado State. We know that. It ended up resulting in a trade for
Yeah.
Jackson Stratton, which was an upgrade. We can say that, I think. And now you've got Gronowski, Sullivan, Hank Brown, Jimmy Sullivan, Jackson Stratton, and of course Ryan Fitzgerald. And those are all six Tim Lester guys. Sullivan, of course, Jimmy Sullivan committed to Iowa before Lester, but Lester went out and saw him throw and was like, "Yeah, here we go." I don't know how they got this guy before me, but they did. They did. And so again, we'll Obviously, we gave the shout outs to Lester. We gave the shout outs to Brad Heinrichs and Tyler Barnes. Got to throw him in here too. I mean, talking with a few people around the program, like those guys are not sleeping right now. Those recruiting departments, I hope they were able to enjoy Christmas at least because these guys are working night and day right now, and they've had their fair share of misses right in the portal between Ethan Onianwa, Pribula, Cam Thompson, who didn't even make it to campus before committing to Mississippi State, but they've kept to the grindstone and made it happen. And I don't think we necessarily account for the pressure that all three of these individuals feel to make these types of things happen. I think we see an offensive coordinator who has revived the Iowa offense and think he gets paid millions of dollars to coach football, but there's so much more to it. Brad Heinrichs, who's not paid to do the job he does. Tyler Barnes, who has had such a shift in college football like everybody else, but as the head of recruiting and GM, chief of staff, all of that. But all three making it happen and having their individual parts in it. So definitely gotta shout all of them out. And I think this is just another one of those things where we look back and at the additions from I think it was the spring and Gill and Sullivan and say it raised the floor. I think this raises the floor, but it also raises the ceiling just because of the type of player Gronowski is. I mean, he
Yep.
was considering the NFL for a reason, right? This guy has
Yep.
the arm talent to be on an NFL roster.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that, Elliot. This raises the floor and it raises the ceiling. Like this is that type of move. We've seen before Iowa was, adding depth and getting more options, and that's important. But Gronowski can offer more than that. I mean, he does offer more depth and more options, obviously, but there's some real, higher end potential there too for next season, which is that's pretty exciting. Iowa's been missing that at quarterback for a while, and Gronowski looks like somebody that can turn that around.
Did Nate Stanley get drafted?
I think he did. I know he was with the Vikings. I'm just trying to remember if he was like a late round draft pick or if he was a free agent signing. But he was
We're gonna
definitely with the
find out.
Vikings for a little bit.
I did. I think he's like got into a grievance with them too. Like, oh, he was selected in the seventh round of the
Seventh
2020
round.
NFL draft. So I was gonna say, imagine an Iowa quarterback getting drafted into the NFL after the last however many years of offense. Like that that this is something I wrote about as well as part of this mercenary thing and him playing with Iowa for just 1 year is he can be part of changing the narrative. Just having him for that 1 year is like, look, he was going to go to the NFL anyway. We raised his stock. He was a fourth round pick now. He was a high fifth round pick now. He went from making $1 million to $5 million based on one season here in Iowa City. And like if he, I mean, I think our expectations collectively are a little bit lower just on based on how from this season to this coming season, just based on how freaking hard the schedule is comparatively.
Yep.
If he's able to go out there and carve up, maybe not carve up, but do something against Oregon as opposed to North Dakota State, you got to think scouts are going to be like, "What?"
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's huge potential for Iowa, and as you pointed it out, it's huge potential for Gronowski to, make some scouts kind of reassess. Oh, okay, we had this guy with a, seventh round, free agent grade, before this, but after seeing what he did this season, hey, there's more there than we thought. So, we can move him up a little bit on the draft board. So,
Okay, now before we get out of here, got to highlight another addition that was made via the portal. Same school, Bryce Hawthorne. We haven't potted since he committed. This was January. Oh, it was like 3 days ago. That feels like
like
it was
Saturday, right?
Saturday. Yes, it was right
Yes,
before I was going to get on the road back from Missouri. Um,
yes. Before you escape the blizzard.
yes, exactly. That feels like 2 weeks ago.
Time has no meaning. What is?
In the portal era, time definitely has no meaning. Um, This is another really good addition for the Iowa defensive line. This shores up the rotation for the defensive tackle spot. You get Aaron Graves back. You get Jeremiah Pittman back, who I think we can continue to label as serviceable. And then you got Jonah Pace and Bryce Hawthorne. And Pace and Hawthorne moving up to power four. Hawthorne has 3 years of eligibility left. That's huge. That's an anchor for your defensive line for the next few years. Pace is a 1 year guy. Pittman and Graves, I believe they both have 1 year left. Pittman might have two. I gotta look to double check, but I think he only has one. And that's we've talked about it before. Kelvin Bell and Jay Neiman prefer to rotate 7, 8 guys. And you've got four in the middle. You've got Herkett back. You've got Llewellyn back. You've got Brian Allen, though he's going to miss the spring. And you're hoping Kenny Merriweather can make a step up, or Yosei Epineza can come in and play right away. Or maybe you can move a linebacker to defensive end like a Derek Weiskopf, maybe Preston Reese, maybe Ben Keeter, maybe he comes back from wrestling. Who knows? Or, one of these other young guys can make this step up like a Joseph Anderson, who we've been told is a freak, and we already knew that, right?
Yep.
Or Chima Chineki. I don't think I told you this, Ross. I was on my way back from Nashville. I was in the airport, and Chima walks by me, and I know Chima a little bit because I covered his recruitment, right? And that
Yep.
dude is just long as hell. His arms are like, I would not be surprised if his one arm was as tall as me. Like that dude is tall and lanky, and if you see his film, it's easy to get excited from high school. And I'm not saying he's going to play as a redshirt freshman, but there's the possibility of a guy like that stepping into the fold. So the defensive line got shored up with a guy who was a freshman All-American at the FCS level, 4.5 sacks, I think, and 22 tackles, if I'm remembering correctly, 5.5
Sounds right.
loss, I think.
Yep. Yep.
This just shores up. I mean, the defensive tackle position went from being a weak spot prior to the addition of Pace to it looks a little better to solidified. And in exchanging some messages with Bryce's dad, Bryce strikes me as a kid that is nervous because he knows he's moving up a level. But I'd rather have a player at that level be nervous and know they're going to have to work than I'm going to step in and be part of the rotation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's going to have to come in and earn it. He's going to have to, prove himself in practice and all that. But that's fine. That's the case for almost a lot of these guys. And I think he's going to have the right attitude. Like you said, he's not going to come in and, expect to be handed anything on a silver platter. He's going to have to fight for it. But you really do like where I was at D tackle now a lot more than where they were a couple weeks ago, or a month ago. And this season, like D tackle, that rotation you mentioned, like, Iowa wants to have four guys so they can keep cycling fresh bodies in there without a drop off in performance and keep, stopping the run and getting after the quarterback. And there were times this last season where they struggled to find four guys who could do that, and I think we saw them lean on Graves and Black a lot, and they're great players, but they also can't play, 80+% of snaps in a game without a drop off in their ability. Like they're going to get tired. They're not going to be as effective if they got to play that many snaps. So having backups that can come in, spell your starters, and perform at a level that's not, it's not the same level as the starters, but it's not a huge drop off. And I think adding Pace and now adding Hawthorne really feels like it puts Iowa at a position where that can happen, where they can bring in some guys that, can perform at a good level and keep that pressure coming from D tackle. And then, yeah, you mentioned the DNs, as well, getting that rotation of guys there. And, they've got a solid group of guys back and a lot of options, I think, to find, that fourth or fifth guys to come in on the outside as an option. I'm personally really excited to see what Yosei can do. We've seen his brother came in and he played as a true freshman and was impactful. So, no pressure, Yosei.
He's been hearing about that his whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That'll be nothing for him, I'm sure. So, yeah, if you can bring him in and have him compete, and maybe you don't have to dip back into the portal, maybe save a scholarship or two. You can give one to Caden Weegan. You can go get a wide receiver. You can go get a DB. You can add some depth on the O line. but
Yep.
there is some flexibility there right now in terms of going into the portal and adding a defensive end. So it wouldn't shock me if that came to fruition as well.
Yeah, I think coming back to kind of what's been a theme throughout our discussion today is, raising the floor versus raising the ceiling. Like, I think my immediate reaction is this definitely raises the floor. It provides more depth, more options, and TBD on how much it raises the ceiling. We got to see how he performs at practices, and then how he performs, once he's at that Power Four level in Hawthorne, that is. And so, if there's somebody out there in the portal that is more of a proven Power Four guy that Iowa can bring in, yeah, by all means, do that. But, for right now, I think what they've done is still really beneficial for next year, and really sets that D line up to have some more success next year, which is huge, because there were a lot of key guys gone from that unit the last couple of years. So there was a need to fill in some spaces there.
Yeah, and they might not go get a Power Four guy. Langdon Kitchen, D2, right? I
Yep.
mean, and they're clearly scooping at different levels and looking at different levels based on all the talent they brought in. It's a lot of group of four, or excuse me, group of five. Damn it, group of five, and FCS type of guys. And you find guys that can plug those holes, and it works. I mean, we've seen it work with Van
Yeah.
Valkenburg. We've seen it work with um who else? FCS level maybe, or a group of five.
I mean, Davion Nixon was a JUCO guy, and that's not quite
Sure.
the same thing. I think Jack Heflin, I think he came from NIU a few years ago. Um,
There are
was a D-line
examples,
guy. Yeah, so there's
right?
there's dudes. There's
Yeah.
dudes that can come in from that level and play for Iowa for sure.
Steven Stilianos, that's another one. Not super
Yeah.
impactful, but definitely was relied upon recently. And yeah, anything else we need to add before I hit the road and cover basketball?
Well, we're not going to talk about basketball. We
I
said
know,
that
no,
already.
no.
This is a safe space, a
Yeah.
basketball-free zone, Iowa fans. No, we'll talk about that sport in a future podcast, promise. But yeah, I think the only other takeaway I would have is, how Iowa fans are feeling about the portal right now. So, let us know in the comments, drop us a line on the premium board, all that good stuff. I think the additions over the last week are huge. Getting Hawthorne to help shore up D tackle was big, and then obviously Gronowski, the biggest fish Iowa's got out of the portal in a couple years, and just at a huge position of need. Like, there was a lot of hand wringing about Iowa's, performance in the transfer portal this year. And I would say not unfounded. There's only adding, two dudes up until Saturday. So it was understandable why people were a little anxious, especially with a lot of, other programs, Wisconsin, just grabbing dudes right and left. Um, they had to. They lost a lot of dudes.
They did.
But I think
Sorry.
it's a lot better position for Iowa right now. They've addressed some positions of need. They've got some really good dudes that look like they can come in and perform, especially Gronowski can help immediately next season. Like, this is what you want to, when you go into the portal, this is what you're looking to do. And I think now we're seeing some success from Iowa that should make fans feel a lot better, I think.
And there's probably going to be, I mean, like I said at one point, there's going to be more, and there
Right.
may be
They
more.
are not done in the portal. Like, there are still more dudes coming.
And there may be more just based off the fact that, oh, they just got Gronowski. Oh, I get it. Phil Parker is the defense. I mean,
Yep.
this is they're not done. Like you said,
Yep.
they're not done. So plenty more to come. Of course, we'll have all that coverage at iowa.rivals.com. Again, premium subscribers, they're privy to a lot of information before it gets public. So we're happy to give it to you there. And we'd love to have you be part of the conversation. So hop over there and join us today, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. That link always down there in the description. So go ahead and click that. And again, like Ross mentioned, drop in the comments, how you feeling now? You feel pretty good about getting Gronowski? What other positions does Iowa need down there? Put it in the comments. If you're new, make sure you like, subscribe, so you don't miss an episode going forward. Even on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can do it there. Leave that rate and review. Helps us out a lot. We greatly appreciate it. And once again, folks, I am Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder for this episode of HawkCast, and we will see you next time.